find your niche. Put on more of a innovator hat when you're looking at what you want to do, and try to find the problem so that way you can create a solution for it. Don't just kind of go in and like, yeah, I just want to fit in and do it. No. Really sort of help to be a change agent in whatever it is that you're looking to get into.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen. My name is Michael T. Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host Tyler Kelly, and we are at Venture Cafe Miami tonight. So Venture Cafe is the largest gathering of innovators anywhere in the world. So on a Thursday evening, there are innovators all over the world gathering and doing all kinds of interesting things. So if you've been to Venture Cafe Miami, you may have run into our guest tonight. Her name is Latoya Stirrup, and we're very happy to have you tonight. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Welcome.
Yes.
So let me tell everyone about Latoya. She's an entrepreneur, producer, strategist, over 14 years of experience in advertising and marketing with some pretty big names like Ogilvy, Agency 10, and The Community. You're one of the founding members and the president of Digital Grass, which is a Knight Foundation grantee committed to promoting diversity and inclusion in the tech and innovation sectors. Definitely need to talk about that. But I also want to point out that you are in the podcast and hosting game as a co-host of Tech, Beats, and Bites, which is a weekly show that's done right here at Venture Cafe Miami.
Yes.
In partnership with Digital Grass and the world famous House of Mac. Thank you for being
How much better can it get than that? Thank you for the intro. That was awesome.
Welcome.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
So first off, I love the earrings, and from what I've seen on social, you wear a lot of things like that. So
yeah.
Do these particular ones have a story behind them? Or?
So these say do the right thing, if you can see. And basically it comes from the movie Spike Lee. He had the movie Do the Right Thing. But tonight we're actually having on Tech Beats and Bites Dwight Bullard. And we're talking about the upcoming election. So we're going to be going through the ballot. So I wore these because it's time to do the right thing. People have to get out and vote. Regardless of where your stance is politically, now is the time to really use your voice and use your vote to make a difference. So do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
Yeah.
So tell us about you have a background in advertising and marketing for some pretty big agencies.
Yeah.
And then you decided to just say, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. Walk me through some of that early experience, but then like the aha moment where you're like,
absolutely. So I fell in love with the idea of communications and advertising. They actually started with the movie Boomerang with Eddie Murphy. I saw it when I was younger, and I was like, I want to do that, what they're doing in the movie. And I remember at the time, my cousin, I was like, what is that called? Like, what field is that? Because I may have been in like middle school. And she was like, that's marketing, advertising. I was like, okay, that makes sense for me. Like, I love that energy. I like that it's creative, but still business. And you're able to sort of be in the realm of film, music, everything that's kind of entertainment, but attached to brands. So from there, I went to Florida State, got my degree in communications. I landed my first job at Ogilvy in New York. It was fantastic because I got to see ad agency at the pinnacle of ad agencies, right? Ogilvy is one of those original Madison Avenue type companies where, you want to walk the famed red halls of Ogilvy and Mather. So I got to do that. And in that particular job, I was able to go in through their associates program where for a year you can rotate throughout the agency to different departments to really get a sense of how an ad agency runs. And then at the end, you can select which department you want to work in. So I chose to go into accounts and I worked on Unilever. So all in all, it was fantastic. And what I kind of had a sense of at that time was that I really wanted to get a little bit more hands-on, a little bit dirtier in terms of how ad agencies run and just my experience, because a lot of times when you're in bigger companies, you kind of have to stick to your role because there are lots of different departments that all kind of work together. So I moved down back to Miami because I also had a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch. So it was starting to come around at that time too. And when I moved back home, that's when I landed the job with Agency 10. I actually, as soon as I got here, I had the job. So it was an easy transition because my project manager at Ogilvy actually used to be the client of one of the companies, one of the brands at Agency 10 at the time, Agency Net had. So that was a fantastic transition. I was there for 5 years. And because it was a smaller digital shop, I was able to sort of have my hands in a lot more than I did at a bigger traditional ad agency. So that was fantastic. And because that's also how I really got into tech. At Ogilvy, I was also on the digital side of the business. And back then, brands didn't even used to put their URL at the end of commercials. Digital was still very much the redheaded stepchild. So once I got to AgencyNet, that's when you started to see Flash websites and a lot of designers and developers doing some really awesome things with code and physics and making particles move and jump. That was the height of sort of web design. So that was very exciting. And then left Agency 10, and then I went to the community. And over there, I also got to experience a little bit more of the traditional side, and as well as the LATAM, because the community touched Latin American business as well as they did general market too. So I was able to sort of get a whole gamut throughout my career. And then I sort of decided that I wanted to leverage all of my years of experience and really sort of capitalize on the opportunities that are here in South Florida, especially because with my family's legacy, my great-grandfather being one of the pioneers of Coconut Grove, I have a very sort of strong tie to wanting to be a part of what's happening locally. And I felt that I can do that and better leverage my time and my skills if I kind of am on my own, and I'm not necessarily tied to a desk and tied to other people's schedules. So that's what sort of made me decide to really sort of step out and do it on my own. So since then, that was about 2013. I do freelance a little bit. I'm kind of getting out of creative services, but around that time is when we started Digital Grass. So Digital Grass is like a collective of professionals. We kind of came together. Each of us had our own business, but we formed Digital Grass because we wanted to be a resource and a support for small businesses who may not have access to the level of work that we were used to. A lot of small businesses who are trying to like launch a business or they're trying to launch an app, they may have some of the components but not everything because they're starting, right? So you may have a designer or a developer who's like, I have this fantastic idea, but they don't have the legal side. They don't have the PR, the marketing side. So we were seeing ourselves as sort of an augmentation to their team. So we did a lot of that. We had a lot of different programs, and then we are now moving more so into content creation, which is where Tech Beats and Bites comes in. So that's the weekly show that we do where we bring on different entrepreneurs, innovators, people who are doing great things in the community to talk about different topics. It all depends on who's on the show, what we talk about.
Wow.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something you said. You were talking about legacy.
Yes.
And I always love finding out like what makes people tick. And when somebody uses a word like that, that's usually the big picture, like why they do what they do. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. So legacy. So my great-grandfather, E.W. Franklin Stirrup, came to Miami from the Bahamas in the 1800s. And he was one of the pioneers of Coconut Grove. And if you know about Miami's history, Coconut Grove is sort of the neighborhood that really the city of Miami grew out of. City Hall is down in the Grove area at the old Pan Am headquarters. So you have that story. And because of what he was able to do at that time, being an African American or Bahamian American who came here at a time where, you know, segregation, everything was sort of happening, and the landscape was very different. So his story has always been a huge support for me, as well as something inspiring for me to continue to build upon. Because a lot of times when you think about it, you know, we stand on the shoulders of those who come before us, but then we also have the obligation to continue to build upon that, right? We just can't let that sort of sit. We have to continue to build the legacy. So for me, I always say it's about continuing the legacy as well as building it. And a lot of things, you know, when we talk about the story of Miami, we need to include a lot more of that. A lot of people don't necessarily know that the incorporation of Miami, there were actually about like 30 Bahamian men who signed the incorporation of Miami at the time because they could read and write. So there's a lot that comes into the diversity, which goes to diversity and inclusion, about the city of Miami and what that sort of looked like, and carrying that history into today, and then what that means for the future of the city.
Yeah. So that leads you exactly to what you're doing today.
Exactly.
So let's dive into today. Like, tell me about, obviously you have multiple things going on, but what are they doing?
Yeah. So Tech Beats and Bites, again, that ties back into my love for communications. I actually, in my senior year in high school, I wrote for the neighbors section of the Miami Herald. So I've always sort of been in and out of journalism. I used to have a blog back in maybe like 2008 or so called Speak Movement that was all about showcasing and highlighting small business owners. And at the time, I kind of was doing everything. And that's how I learned that I did not necessarily want to do everything. I was doing the video interviews, editing the videos, writing the copy, writing the articles, and it was just a lot. So I learned that I like to do the interviews. I'll leave the editing to somebody else. So that's why, and everything kind of comes full circle. And it's a beautiful thing to kind of see how your life happens in cycles, and everything kind of just comes around and then it starts to perfect itself. So that's where I feel that I am right now, because even some of the things, even with my hair. So my sisters and I, we have a company called Cosmology, and we're developing innovative tools and accessories for textured hair. So again, that's something else that I was sort of dibbling and dabbling in before, but now it's coming back around full circle. So a lot of what I am using my time and my energy and my background, especially in advertising and marketing in, is to sort of allow myself to get into these industries and bring solutions. I like to think of myself as a creative solutionist because I have the background of production, project management. I know how to sort of move ideas from beginning to end, leverage different resources, pull them in when I need them, pull in different resources as we go along, and do it in a very efficient and effective way. So that's a lot of how I take that legacy part of myself, the community part of myself, the sort of beauty, entertainment, and I'm sort of shaping my experience and how I see myself moving into the future.
Talk to me about, so we're in, I think it's the most diverse city in America, right?
Miami's pretty diverse.
Part.
Yeah.
So tell me how, in the most diverse city in America, we don't leave anybody behind, like that inclusion part.
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough one. Especially because I would say, well, one of the things that we definitely need to pay attention to is just public policy, which is why this election is huge. When you think about, we actually just did, Mike and I, my co-host for Tech Beats and Bites, we just did the blue carpet for the iGen Film Festival at the Lyric Theater in Overtown. And Mayor Suarez and Commissioner Suarez, we both interviewed them. And we talked a little bit about that. We talked about sort of how to make Miami as inclusive as possible. And one of the things that you often hear is the brain drain and the talent drain, where people feel like they don't really have opportunities here. So people are leaving, looking for other opportunities in other cities. And one of the reasons that that's happening, especially when you talk about film and entertainment, is because of the incentives. At one point, there used to be really great incentives to film and shoot things in Miami. But because, again, going back to politics and policy, those incentives were gone. So now you're seeing Atlanta, Louisiana, LA are huge when it comes to film, and Miami's not having that same growth. And again, that goes right back to politics. So one of the things, and again, I'm not trying to get into politics at all, but a lot of times we don't necessarily see how important politics is when it comes to business and innovation and technology. And a lot of us are on that side trying to do what we need to do, but then we're not necessarily focusing on the political side. And we need to sort of bring that together to make sure that the policies that are going, the legislation that's being put in place is what we want to see for our communities. Because a lot of times, especially when you talk about more so the communities of color, those cities and those neighborhoods aren't necessarily their own municipalities. They're a part of the city of Miami. A lot of the more sort of thriving communities are now their own incorporated municipalities where they can kind of control how their tax dollars are spent and what they want to see in their cities. So it's important for those of us who are not necessarily our own municipality. It's important for everyone to vote, but especially if you're in the city of Miami, to pay attention, because local elections matter, especially because you're a part of a bigger municipality that has a lot more of their resources being spent more widely than cities that are smaller and tighter because they have their own sort of political network that's more tightly knit and close. So that's one of the things that I definitely am paying attention to and want to call attention to, is how to sort of leverage that and to not feel as if because you're in the private sector, you don't need the public sector.
So let's say everybody votes, does the right thing.
Yes.
And 5 years from now, what does this city look like?
Yeah.
Because it's moving rapidly.
It's moving really quickly. And
in like your vision for the city, not like what it may actually be.
Right,
like what's the vision?
Oh, I would love for Miami to just be fantastic, especially when you're talking about, so there's some really cool things that are happening, right? You're having the Knight Foundation, which is fueling a lot of the innovation, tech, and entrepreneurship side of the city. You're seeing a lot of businesses sort of popping up, and it's a wonderful ecosystem that is relatively new to the city. And that's beautiful. So I definitely want to see that continue to thrive. And it's bringing a lot of resources and people down and seeing Miami in a different way. And I definitely think that on that particular side, we don't need to model ourselves after Silicon Valley. We need to be our own. sort of have our own vibe. How do we want to move? How do we want to shape that? So I definitely see that growing. Transportation. Brightline is doing something great, but I would love for Miami to be a lot more connected with the east to west in terms of solutions. And you're seeing it where, like downtown, we can see the skyline right here. Downtown is growing. There's cranes in the sky all the time. But then what does that mean in terms of commuting? So I would love to see the city have a lot more when it comes to commuting, especially because I lived in New York. So I know how awesome it could be to ride the train and to have a bus where you would actually be okay getting on, and having other modes of transportation where you can do things instead of having to be stuck in traffic for 2 hours. You could be more productive. So I would love to see that. I would also just love to see more sort of bridging between the different sectors of Miami, right? Because you have down south, you have the west, you have the north, and you have the east. And right now it still feels very pocketed. Like, how many people from down south or out west, like West Kendall, Hialeah, etc., come to Venture Cafe? This is easily accessible right off of 95, but is it really sort of drawing in people from those other areas that are more suburban? So starting to see a little bit more of that cross-pollination, because that's how you can also create more solutions, because you're hearing the viewpoints of people from other areas of the city. And we want, it to be a complete experience and it's great for every sort of pocket to have its own culture, because that's what makes it fun, right? You want to go to Calle Ocho for Calle Ocho. You want to go to Miami Gardens for the stadium, et cetera, et cetera. You want to go to the beach for the beach experience, and you want to go to Grove for the Coconut Grove experience. So that's fantastic. But we definitely need to have some cohesion and some cross-pollination just to make sure that everybody is thriving. And just continue to build the city of the future. Just sort of seeing, the Miami Foundation is doing really great things with the Public Space Challenge, and just sort of starting to see that happen, and having more spaces like the Underline really kind of go into fruition, and to make opportunities for people to really take advantage of public spaces. I think that that's one of the things that Miami definitely needs to take more advantage of, because the weather's fantastic, but we spend a lot of time in our cars. We're not necessarily out in the streets walking around shopping. And because that's not what we do, a lot of businesses aren't able to thrive. They close quickly because there's no real foot traffic. People go from A to B, but you miss everything in between because you're in your car. So seeing a little bit more of that, I think, will make Miami fantastic. So hopefully that'll happen in the next 5 years.
Yeah. So through everything that you're doing,
yes,
two things. What's kind of a story of something that you've been proud that you've been able to accomplish or like take part in? And then what are you excited about?
I am definitely excited to be taking part in what's happening right now in Miami. Whenever I talk to someone about the city, I always say that this is the time where you want to be here, because you can really sort of be a part of the growth of it, and you can really have a hand in how Miami moves and what it becomes in the future. New York is New York is New York. It's always going to be that. LA, same thing. But here you can really sort of make your mark and have your own sort of viewpoint. Right now there's the Magic City Innovation District that's coming up. You have the MIMO District that's continuing to change. Even Coconut Grove is getting a redo, if you will. So there's a lot of opportunity here. So I'm excited to be here right now doing what I'm doing, because I just see that there's longevity in it. And going back to the whole idea about legacy, that's it, right? So knowing that my great-grandfather was a part of building Miami in the 1800s, early 1900s, and I'm being a part of the future, that's awesome.
So for somebody that wants to, get in and make a difference in Miami, what advice would you have for them?
Find your niche. There's a lot of opportunities in Miami. If you are into real estate development, that's of course huge, right? But I think that there's space for more sustainable real estate development, especially when you're talking about affordable housing, and ways to maybe use the landscape in a more efficient and effective way. We know that there are water issues looming, right? You have the whole rising sea level. There's a lot of different things that are happening. So there are ways in which you can sort of like find your niche in whatever industry that you're in, even if it's transportation or tourism. There's a lot of different things that you can do with that. So I would definitely say put on more of a innovator hat, when you're looking at what you want to do, and try to find the problem so that way you can create a solution for it. Don't just kind of go in and like, yeah, I just want to fit in and do it. No. Really sort of help to be a change agent in whatever it is that you're looking to get into.
Latoya, how can people get in touch with you with what's the name? Cosmology. I thought that's what it was, but then I thought of hair and so you're doing the whole head.
Yes.
How can they get in touch with You got products yet, or you're still?
So we're manufacturing. We actually did 3D printing to do our prototypes. Again, that's me merging the whole technology side of everything, and we're manufacturing now. So we'll be shipping. We did pre-orders. We did a whole crowdfunding campaign. So we'll be shipping out in December with our first line of patent pending hair tools that minimizes the breakage of when you're trying to detangle textured curly hair.
Okay. How website?
Yes.
Social for that?
Yes.
For Digital Grass, for you personally, how can people get in touch with
Absolutely. So Cosmology, we spell it phonetically. So it's actually KAZMALEJE.com, and it's the same on all social at Cosmology. And for me personally, at Latoya Stirrup. And then for Digital Grass, it's actually www.digigrass.com and at Digigrass across social. And my website is www.latoyastirrup.com.
Latoya, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you guys for having me.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co and be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're in Miami, visit us at Venture Cafe on Thursday nights. You can find details at venturecafemiami.org and connect with us on social at We Are Slam and Venture Cafe MIA.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we